So welcome to the SecOps integration section of the Cybersecurity Reference Architectures. My name is Mark Simos. I'm lead cybersecurity architect at Microsoft. Joseph?
Yes, and I'm Joseph Davis, Chief Security Advisor, Health and Life Sciences. Thank you, Mark.
So when we think about security operations integration, security operations is where pretty much everything that happens gets dealt with, right? It's kind of the bottom of the hill, or however you want to call it. This is where everything ends up. So, if an incident happens because something hasn't been patched, et cetera, security operations really has to kind of pick it up, clean up the adversary, et cetera. So a very important function within the organization. The interesting thing about security operations, and Joseph, I know you've been blogging about this since at least 2014, I believe,
That's right.
Is that it kind of suffers also from the siloing of the organization. When you break things up into specialties and specific technical tools, it's very difficult to respond to incidents. So to use the analogy here, the attacker in many ways is kind of immune to this because they're just traversing the IP networks and the identity and the authentication, much like a legitimate user would, and they're often using those same paths and so those same authentication protocols. But the defenders, because they're trying to trace them and coordinate and correlate all those different things, they have to kind of hop around between the different silos to get the information to figure out where the attacker last went. Anything to add?
Oh, absolutely. This was the bane of our existence. I was a CISO as early as 2007, and even back then, the technologies really didn't exist that were fully integrated. So we buy a bunch of best-of-breed technologies, sometimes up to, I think at one organization we had about 70 different technologies, not including all the infrastructure technology that we were trying to grab data from, because it's all that infrastructure technology is what the attacker is going to be riding on. But the problem that we ran into, just not even from a technical perspective, but also from a people and process perspective, is that everyone was pretty much living in their silos. So if you take a job and you're responsible for antivirus, that's what you're focused on. You're not focused on the proxy. You're not focused on the firewall. And if you see something on the antivirus, you might see it as a one-off. You're not going to see it as an integrated problem, an end-to-end problem. And that's why silos are the bane of security operations. The other problem that you're going to run into is that post-breach or post-compromise, depending on how you look at it, you're going to bring on those very expensive incident response analysts, and they're going to come in and try and figure out what went wrong, including attribution. And what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to go to each one of these silos to collect data. And even if they're using a SIEM or something like a full data packet capture, they're still going to have to do correlation between those two systems. And then ultimately, there's going to be one of those silos that wasn't reporting into the SIEM. And the reasons for that can vary, right? But you're not going to get a complete picture of exactly what happened. And if the attacker's been in your environment for more than, say, 200 days, a lot of that log data has already been archived. And it's going to be very, very difficult to pull it back and rehydrate it and then find out exactly when the attack started.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's challenging because if you have one incident that happened in the antivirus, one happened on identity detection, another one happened on applications, it might be the same attacker that did it, but you've got maybe 2-3 different analysts looking at the exact same attacker incident from a different perspective and don't realize it's the same incident, it's the same attacker. And so you end up wasting a lot of cycles by not having that shared context. And so, the challenge then becomes, okay, we need to integrate these tools. Great. But it's actually really hard because each of these different silos pivots on something different. If you've got, a proxy tool, it's going to pivot on a different set of things than an antivirus tool, than an email tool, than a network detection tool. And so you have to figure out, okay, how do these things pivot? How do I connect them? And that's difficult engineering work. And not all the vendors are really good at documenting exactly what they're generating on top of it. And then we found that there's some unique challenges, even if you get through that okay, now let's go see. We've got an alert here on antivirus. We've got an alert here on identity tool, but they're at completely different levels of confidence because when you look at the AV testing industry, if you don't report something, you missed it, right? And so you're going to get dinged and you're going to get a lower score. So every antivirus vendor tends to be verbose. But if you look at an identity tool, and many security operations are very familiar with network, but not with identity. And so anything that looks like a false positive is, I don't want another tool, leave me alone, right?
Right.
So they tend to be like very conservative, and anything other than like a 90% or 95 or 99% that doesn't show up, that isn't a true positive, you're going to get knocked out of it completely. And so they tend to be biased in a completely different direction. And so it's really a nightmare to integrate these things. And security operations and SOCs have to spend a lot of resources figuring out, okay, how do we bring all these things together so that an analyst can just do their job?
Right. And what's the single point of truth, right? We talk about mapping challenges. What are we pivoting on? I'll give you an example. So years ago, our primary method of kind of getting back into the office was VPN. I know that many of us who have adopted the modern workplace don't do that anymore as much or at all, depending on what organization you're working for and how far they've gone to the cloud. But VPN was typically our primary way of getting in. Now, what happens with a VPN? I connect to the VPN. I'm given a DHCP lease, which is a TCP/IP address. And I'll maybe hold on to that lease for 3 or 4 hours while I'm doing my work. Maybe I hold on to it for 8 hours because that's my shift. I do a full 8 hours of work. And then somebody else comes in. I log off. Somebody else comes in because we're a multinational company. They get the exact same DHCP address. But do we know if something occurs and we're trying to attribute that occurrence back to a particular host or identity? Is it me or is it the last person to get the DHCP lease? And that's always been, I know it sounds simple, but it always was a tremendous challenge. And the way we're getting around that challenge, at least with the Microsoft suite, is that we're doing point-in-time inventory of everything. So we know what identities were on the system. We know if there was a domain admin logged in, maybe in the back end trying to help somebody with something, right? And that's the, and they got attacked. Maybe they got impersonated with a pass the hash. We'll know exactly what the host was. We'll know the operating system of the host, and we'll know all the DHCP addresses or leases that were granted to that machine and when. So it's much, much easier to kind of figure out who patient zero is when all the tools are working off of the same data points.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more and kind of switch to the next slide on how Microsoft is addressing this problem. So first and foremost, just foundationally, we need these tools to talk to each other, right? I mean, that's the minimum bar, and that's really where our cloud services effectively, we're doing this integration work, this engineering work for our customers, so they don't have to. And that's, and a lot of this is being done in Microsoft 365 Defender. And of course, we're tying that very closely with Azure Sentinel. So you have both the SIEM and the XDR, that sort of broad view and the deep view, that are also talking to each other. So you don't have to figure out, so you don't have to do any of this work. You simply just check the box and say integrate with that, or you don't even have to check it, it's done. So that's like step one. Is the job done? Absolutely not. There's more to it, right? So the second stage of work that we had to do was, you get an IP address and you get different intelligence and different signals and different attributes on an IP address in these different things depending on which tool you're using. Same thing about an email, same thing about a user account, because different things like the endpoint knows about the user, and then the identity system knows about the user. The application might know about the user. So you have all these different places where you have information on the user that isn't just the identity pillar. And so everybody's got to have the same schema. They've got to have the same way of talking about it, the same kinds of attributes. And so that's the next stage of engineering work that we did, was we speak one language, we have one schema, all talking the same thing. And got the agreements, the engineering work is done, and now they're all talking the same language in the back end, so it's all done. Next stage is kind of the semantics and meaning. Okay, now you got the raw data and it's all consistent, great. But now you've got to generate events and alerts and have the same meaning for what is an alert, going back to that identity versus antivirus, right? Like one of them is the sky is falling and the other one's like, let me check real quick, right? So you want to have like a clear definition of alerts. So that was the next set of agreements between the engineering teams, and then they executed on that. So we have a single way of looking at that. And then last, you need to make sure all the automation works over it. And we have two different automation solutions, or SOAR solutions. The one that's built in Azure Sentinel is much more of an orchestration oriented. There's a lot of pre-built playbooks, but it's much more of like I don't want to say do it yourself, but it's much more flexible and able to be configured, for the tools that you have and connect to whatever you've got. Whereas the auto IR feature that's in Microsoft 365 Defender, which is based on the Hexadite technology, is much more of a, we know exactly what data we're going to get, we know exactly what events, what alerts we're going to get, and I'm going to automatically do the whole investigation for you, and I'm going to say, this is how we're going to clean it up, which I've just pre-automated, yes or no, and then turn those on as you build confidence in those. And so two different kind of approaches to SOAR because of the arbitrary versus well-known data knowledge. But we had to then, of course, update all that so that these are all consistent. And so that's all the work that we've done, completely silent, that you never see in an M365 Defender, so that when you look at that console, it's done, right? Oh, here's an alert, and it found this, and here's this, and it saw this, and it was doing that on the SaaS service, and it was this account here, and we're pretty confident about this. So yeah, that's really kind of the crux of what we've been focusing on. So Joseph, I'm sorry, I've been talking a lot. Anything to add there?
Oh, absolutely. I remember the night that Sentinel, it was evening on Eastern Standard Time when Sentinel was announced, right? So it was fully released, and I went up, and of course, I already had an Azure account, so I signed up, and I sat in the Microsoft office, just happened to be in one, and in 2.5 hours, I had all of my individual security components tied into a single pane of glass. And I jokingly said to myself, it took me back when I was asked to create a SOC at one of the multinational companies I was working for as a CISO. That took me about 2.5 years to do, and to get it right. I mean, it was easy to stand up the SIEM, but it was very difficult to correlate all that data. And we actually went out and spent quite a lot of money on getting a third-party security service provider to do 10 correlations a month for us between all the different data types that we had. And I actually had to bring in some data scientists from the DBA team. So I went and poached them out of the DBA team to come and help us as if it was a business problem. And so here I am, I don't know, it was February 28th, I think, 2018 or something like that, 2019, when Sentinel came out, and I was done in 2.5 hours. And, I'm not a data scientist. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is revolutionary. This is really going to change it because Microsoft's done it for me. And forget about playbook automation and trying to do that on your own. I mean, now you can go out and buy products and try and retrofit them into what you have, but it's not easy. So when I saw Playbook, and Microsoft actually built in playbooks for the most common scenarios and the common attack scenarios and things that happen over and over and over that the service desk gets calls for. And if you could really reduce that high volume, low value activity, you could get the SOC analysts to really focus on what they need to focus on.
100% agree. So this has been an overview of all the investments that Microsoft has done for security integration, quite frankly, so that you don't have to. So hopefully this was informative and helpful for y'all. Joseph, thank you very much, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you.